It's cliché to compare the life of a country music star to the events of a country music song, but the real-life story of Randy Travis sounds like it was ripped from a tragic ballad. Randy Travis was pushed into music at an early age by his father, who gave all of his children instruments and entered them into conventions and contests. A strict taskmaster on and off the stage, Travis's mother sometimes bore the brunt of her husband's darker impulses. Travis said that when he was about 10, his father, quote, got drunk and started beating on mama. That's when Travis sprang into action, writing in his memoir, Forever and Ever Amen, "So I took up for her, jumped on him, and pulled him off her." Immediately after, Travis ran out of the family home, his father giving chase with a raised gun. Travis wrote that he hid in a nearby cornfield for 2 days without food or water. Travis described his teenage self as a juvenile delinquent. He wrote, "I was smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol by the time I was 10 years old. Not long after that, I was using marijuana regularly." Travis routinely skipped school and got such poor grades that he dropped out for good after the 8th grade. He also earned a hefty rap sheet. The future star was charged with breaking and entering, public drunkenness, driving under the influence, and attempting to elude police. Back in February 2012, Randy Travis was living on the Chrysalis Ranch, a fancy spread outside the small Texas town of Tioga. Tioga is about 20 miles away from the town of Sanger, and that's where Travis had a very boozy run-in with the law. A Sanger police officer was doing his rounds at about 1:30 a.m. on the morning after the Super Bowl. He noticed a suspicious vehicle parked outside the First Baptist Church. When the officer went to investigate, he found Travis behind the wheel of the 1998 Pontiac, smelling of alcohol with an open wine bottle in the passenger's seat. Travis, who reportedly slurred his words and stumbled while exiting his car, said he'd had an argument with his girlfriend and was trying to make his way home, and that he already thought he was in Tioga. Travis was arrested and booked on a Class C misdemeanor citation of public intoxication. Unfortunately, the rest of 2012 didn't go much better for him. According to a Dallas NBC affiliate, Randy Travis went to a convenience store in Tioga, Texas one night in August 2012 and asked for cigarettes. It was a normal exchange, except that Travis was naked. When the clerk asked Travis how he planned to pay for his smokes without a wallet, Travis got angry and left. Several parties made calls to 911, and soon officers found the country star bruised and drunk, not far from a totaled Pontiac. Travis refused field sobriety tests, so police told the singer they'd have to take him in, at which point Travis threatened to kill them.
I know the head of mafioso families, man. I promise you I do.
After posting bond of $21,500, Travis was released from jail the next morning. In his later memoir, Travis blamed the incident on the effect of just 2 drinks combined with the prescription sleep aid Ambien. Less than a year after this ordeal, Randy Travis endured a chain of increasingly awful and alarming medical events, after which his appearances have been limited. According to one of his doctors who spoke with Today, Travis was in otherwise fine health until June 2013 when he contracted a viral upper respiratory illness. Before long, Travis was diagnosed with viral cardiomyopathy, a heart muscle infection generally caused by the Coxsackie B virus. Travis slowly recovered and appeared to be out of danger. During recovery, though, Travis suddenly experienced a massive stroke, which necessitated surgery to relieve pressure on the singer's brain. Fortunately, he made it through the operation and was out of the hospital 3 weeks after his medical crisis began. After 2 years of intensive rehabilitation, Travis could finally walk, shower, and dress himself without assistance. However, at that point, he still hadn't regained the use of the right side of his body. Travis described his overall state as damaged. The stroke also stripped Travis of his iconic singing voice. However, during his induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame 3 years after his stroke, Travis delivered a whispered rendition of Amazing Grace.
You coming back?
Well, I don't know.
Randy Travis apparently has a way with children. Travis was never a biological father, and it's something he seems to regret. Wife Mary Travis explained to Taste of Country, he wanted children. I think his relationship with Lib, who was so much older than him, and they were not able to, is what he explained to me. Lib is Lib Hatcher, Travis's first wife and manager, and she's 16 years older than the singer. By the time they were a couple, Hatcher was nearly too old to become pregnant. When that relationship ended and Travis moved on to his second marriage, it was similarly too late in the game for kids. But that's far from the only regret Travis has regarding his relationship with Hatcher. According to People, Travis met Lib Hatcher in 1977. He was 17 at the time and she was 33, and they met at a weekly talent contest at the Charlotte club she owned. At the time, Travis was about to earn a 5-year prison sentence for breaking into a store until Hatcher convinced the judge to release Travis into her custody. The singer went to live with Hatcher and her husband. She then became Travis's manager, which led to friction in the marriage. Ordered to choose between the marriage or managing young Randy Travis, she chose the latter. Around 1982, when the pair moved to Nashville, the arrangement turned romantic. They married in secret in 1991. The marriage fizzled out in October 2010 when Travis filed for divorce. Travis and Hatcher decided to continue their business arrangement, but that wouldn't last much longer either. Randy Travis fired Lib Hatcher from her job as his manager in 2011. In April 2012, per the Nashville Business Journal, Hatcher sued Travis for breach of contract with their post-divorce management agreement. Travis filed a countersuit, which according to the Daily Freeman, accused Hatcher of publicly revealing confidential information to intentionally cause harm to the singer's career and reputation. During this time, Travis suffered his stroke. Fortunately, he believed he'd insured his voice with Lloyd's of London, but in truth, he had no such coverage for disability or concert cancellation, even though he'd paid out around $250,000 annually in premiums.
And he knows all the words to every song. That's the funny thing with the stroke and the aphasia, is the brain knows it all.
Travis called this discovery a financial oversight or perhaps willful disregard or mishandling of my fiduciary affairs. In an interview with Taste of Country in 2019, Travis called his financial situation, quote, dire, with his memoir co-author Ken Abraham adding that, quote, hopefully the book will help.
Kris Kristofferson has been a hustling musician, a marquee concert draw, an actor, a sex symbol, an athlete, and a writer. But most of all, he's a legend. Here's the untold truth of Kris Kristofferson. Kris Kristofferson was born into a military family and spent his childhood moving from base to base. Eventually, though, they settled down in San Mateo, California, where Kristofferson enrolled at Pomona College. He became a star athlete, excelling at football, rugby, and track and field, and earned the coveted Golden Gloves honor for his skill at boxing. But he was also a star student, and in 1958, he was awarded the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship, which sent him to Oxford University in England to study English literature. There, he began writing songs and performing in small venues, but pressure from his family forced him to give up his dreams and instead join the Army. He quickly excelled there, too, becoming an Army Ranger and helicopter pilot. Eventually, he was offered the chance to teach English at the famed West Point Military Academy. But he had other ideas. Before accepting the position at West Point, Kristofferson went on leave and decided to visit Nashville, the center of country music. A friend's cousin, Mary John Wilkin, was a songwriter there, and she liked some of Kristofferson's tunes. The visit sealed it. Kristofferson turned down the position at West Point, quit the Army, and moved to Nashville to try to make it as a songwriter. He told Cowboys and Indians, "I'd been writing songs since I was 11 years old, and I knew immediately that this is where I belong." His family was appalled. His wife eventually divorced him, and his parents disowned him, and he wasn't exactly an overnight success. While he honed his craft and tried to sell his songs, Kristofferson made a meager living by working as a janitor at Columbia Record Studios in Nashville, where he swept floors and emptied ashtrays used by the likes of George Jones, Bob Dylan, and Johnny Cash. Though Kristofferson soon began selling an occasional song here or there, it wasn't enough to pay his bills, so he got a job as a helicopter pilot. Finally, 5 long years after arriving in Nashville, the floodgates opened and Kristofferson became a sensation, thanks in part to one particularly bold stunt. While working as a janitor at the recording studio, he gave June Carter one of his demo tapes, but her husband, Johnny Cash, wasn't interested in listening to the songs. So Kristofferson decided to make an impression. He flew his helicopter straight to Cash's house and landed it on his lawn. Cash claimed that Kristofferson sauntered off the helicopter with a beer in one hand and a demo in the other, but Kristofferson has said he doesn't remember Cash even being home at the time. Still, it worked. Cash listened to Kristofferson's tune Sunday Morning Coming Down and decided to both record it and play it live on his hit TV show. The song became a smash sensation in 1970, just one of several mega hits Kristofferson would write that year and the next, including Loving Her Was Easier Than Anything I'll Ever Do Again, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and Me and Bobby McGee, which became a posthumous #1 Billboard single for Kristofferson's ex-lover Janis Joplin in 1971. Though Kristofferson's own singing career was up and down, he continued to pen hit after hit in the early 70s. And he didn't just write great songs, he also had an ear for identifying talent in others. In 1971, Kristofferson played a 4-night stand at the Quiet nightclub in Chicago with Steve Goodman as his opening act. Each night, Goodman implored Kristofferson to go across town to see a friend of his perform. Finally, on the last night, Kristofferson relented, and at 2 a.m. he got to hear an unknown singer-songwriter named John Cline play to a nearly empty club. Cline told Billboard, "I got on the stage right in front of him and sang about 7 songs. And then he bought me a beer and asked if I could get back up there and sing those 7 again and anything else I wrote." Kristofferson was convinced and soon introduced Cline to a number of key players in Nashville. It led to a record deal, and soon Cline was recording his first album, consisting of those same songs he had played for Kristofferson in that empty nightclub. Cline told Billboard, "It really was a Cinderella story, truly." In 2020, just months before he passed away, Cline was honored with a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award for a career that might not have happened were it not for the intervention of fellow musician Kris Kristofferson. Equal parts celebrity, wandering troubadour, and restless artist, it shouldn't come as a surprise that Kris Kristofferson has loved and lost love a few times. The singer-songwriter has been married several times, while also enjoying long and public romances with many of his 70s musical contemporaries, as well as other celebrities. Besides Janis Joplin, the Los Angeles Times reported that he also once dated Patti Davis, a writer and often estranged daughter of President Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan. Folk icon Joan Baez told the Chicago Tribune of her dalliance with Kristofferson, while Carly Simon wrote in her memoir of a, quote, slam-dunk deranged month or so spent with Kristofferson. And at the height of Kristofferson's fame, 1973 to 1980, he was married to fellow singing star Rita Coolidge, with whom he recorded the hit album Full Moon. Kristofferson's swinging days are now long behind him, though, as he's been happily married to Lisa Myers since 1983. At the height of his music career, Kristofferson took an unexpected detour into acting and soon became one of the biggest leading men in Hollywood. In the early 70s, he starred in several cult classics, including Sam Peckinpah's 1973 Western Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Kristofferson played the latter title character and earned a Most Promising Newcomer nomination at the BAFTA Awards. Peckinpah then recruited Kristofferson to play a dangerous biker in his next feature, the underworld drama Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. From there, Kristofferson jumped to leading man status as Rancher David, love interest for a world-weary waitress in Martin Scorsese's Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Able to play romantic leads while also boasting a musical background made Kristofferson the perfect choice to play John Norman Howard, the fading rock star who discovers an exciting new talent played by Barbra Streisand in A Star Is Born, a remake of the 1937 and 1954 films. Kristofferson won a Golden Globe for his performance. Just when it seemed like he was at his peak, though, one ill-fated role derailed and nearly destroyed his career. At the end of the 70s, Kristofferson agreed to star in Heaven's Gate, a slow, meditative, experimental sort of Western about a little-known land dispute in 1890s Wyoming. From the Deer Hunter filmmaker Michael Cimino, significantly over budget and past deadline, the film is regarded as one of the biggest bombs in Hollywood history. Suddenly, Kristofferson was a Hollywood pariah. He told the Los Angeles Times, "I'm sure it knocked me off the course I had been on right then. I think that it made me, for a while, unmarketable." Though his acting career was seemingly finished, Kristofferson managed to get back on his feet musically with a little help from his friends. In 1984, Johnny Cash was filming the holiday TV special Christmas on the Road in Montreux, Switzerland, and he implored some friends and colleagues to join him. They just so happened to be 3 of the biggest names in country music: Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and of course, Kris Kristofferson. After taping all day, they'd head back to the studio to jam well into the evening. And according to Rolling Stone, they realized that they played together so well that they might as well form a supergroup and cut an album. The project was a landmark country event. Released in 1985 entitled Highwayman, the single of the same name hit #1 on the country music charts. And the follow-up, Desperados Waiting for a Train, hit number 15. The album's name soon became the group's name, sort of, the Highwaymen. In addition to establishing themselves as tastemakers and the godfathers of modern country music, and laying the groundwork for other monumental collaborations, the Highwaymen became a pop culture machine. The foursome also starred together in the 1986 made-for-TV movie Stagecoach, and 4 discs worth of audio dramatizations for classic Louis L'Amour Western stories, while releasing more albums in 1990 and 1995. Kris Kristofferson's acting career got back on track in the 90s, thanks in large part to an acclaimed role in the indie hit Lone Star. And that led to easily his best-known role as the fan-favorite badass Abraham Whistler in Blade. A man shattered by the loss of his entire family to vampires, he takes teenage vampire Blade into his care, gives him a serum he's developed to quell the blood hunger, and trains his young charge in his profession, vampire hunting. While the Blade trilogy is based on Marvel Comics characters, Whistler did not originate in print. Blade screenwriter David S. Goyer invented him. Goyer told the Comics Continuum, "I thought it would be interesting for Blade to have a teacher, the aging gunfighter who passes down his knowledge." Goyer first considered Patrick McGowan or Jon Voight for the role, until he was blown away by Kristofferson's performance in Lone Star. Kristofferson so enjoyed playing Whistler that he returned for 2 Blade sequels. A cruel twist in the story of Kris Kristofferson, a man whose life has been overstuffed with one adventure and accomplishment after another. For many years, he couldn't remember a lot of it. According to Rolling Stone, the singer-songwriter began to suffer memory loss in his 70s, which doctors originally attributed to either an encroaching case of Alzheimer's disease or dementia caused by repeated strikes to the head suffered during his days boxing and playing football and rugby when he was a high school and college student. Kristofferson's mental deterioration got to the point where he'd forget what he was doing in the middle of activities, and his attempts to write a song about it faltered. In 2016, though, Kristofferson got an unexpected ray of hope when he tested positive for Lyme disease. Proper treatment for that condition, along with dropping the strong medications he was taking for Alzheimer's, combined to largely restore Kristofferson's mental acuity. His wife Lisa told Rolling Stone, "Some days he's perfectly normal, and it's easy to forget that he is even battling anything." Kristofferson believes he first contracted the sickness from a tick bite he got while shooting the movie Disappearances in the Vermont forest in 2006. Kristofferson stands up for what he believes, a trait that has often gotten him in hot water with fans on both sides of the political divide. In the late 70s, the far left-wing Sandinistas successfully staged a revolution in Nicaragua. They faced violent resistance from the Contras, a group financially backed by the Ronald Reagan administration. Kristofferson publicly favored the Sandinistas, even making trips to Nicaragua. He told the Washington Post, "I'm a supporter. I know it's not hip to be." His support for left-wing causes cost him fans among the traditionally conservative country music fan base, and after he spoke out against the Gulf War in 1991, protesters picketed his shows. But Kristofferson has angered progressives too. In 1987, ABC aired America, a miniseries about life in the U.S. after a Soviet coup. Kristofferson starred as a patriotic freedom fighter. Around that time, he attended a protest in Nevada, one of among 2,000 opposed to the United States Cold War move to resume nuclear testing. Kristofferson told the Washington Post, "As you can imagine, the place was full of people who were violently opposed to the film. This woman came up and said, 'You can't atone for America by doing this.' So why did he take the role?" Kristofferson explained, "I did not want to be involved in anything that increased Cold War tensions, but the fact is that the film was going to be made, and I felt that it was important that the part of the hero be played by somebody coming from my position. And that position, as always, is one of conviction."
Legendary musician Kenny Rogers was a fixture in country and soft rock for decades, touring constantly, releasing dozens of albums, and even lending his name to a chain of chicken restaurants. On March 20th, 2020, Rogers passed away, surrounded by his family. He was 81 years old. Kenny Rogers' first taste of success came with his high school doo-wop group, The Scholars. The quartet released 6 singles in the late 1950s, but the group quickly fizzled out, and Rogers embarked on a solo career for the first time. He performed his single That Crazy Feeling on American Bandstand, as well as a Texas program called The Larry Kane Show. That's also where the singer, going by Kenneth Rogers at the time, got his stage name. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Rogers recalled, "As I'm going out, Larry says, 'You know, you can't call yourself Kenneth Rogers.' I said, 'That's my name. What would you call me?' 'Kenny Rogers,' he said." Not quite a superstar yet, Rogers then joined a jazz group called the Bob Doyle Three before singing and playing double bass in the popular folk ensemble, the New Christie Minstrels. After 2 years, Rogers and 3 Christie members started a lightly psychedelic pop rock group called Kenny Rogers and the First Edition. They had a huge hit in 1968 with the single Just Dropped In to See What Condition My Condition Was In, which modern audiences might recognize from The Big Lebowski. Imagine a world without the Eagles. Without Kenny Rogers, that might have been a reality. The gambler himself gave founding Eagles member Don Henley his big break. In the late 60s, Henley formed a band called Felicity with some friends from his hometown of Linden, Texas. One day in 1968, they were in a clothing store in Dallas called the Electric Rocking Horse when fate intervened in the form of a bearded stranger who they ran into while shopping. Henley told CBS Sunday Morning, We were buying bell-bottom pants and Nehru jackets and stuff. Rogers was there because there was a really beautiful girl working there. They struck up a conversation and a friendship, and as Rogers told Rolling Stone, I took them to LA and they lived with me for 6 months. Their band changed their name to Shiloh, and Rogers produced their one and only LP. Kenny Rogers appeared atop lots of lists, Billboard charts mostly, but he also claimed to have been almost as naturally talented and successful at something besides music, tennis. Rogers began playing the sport in earnest when he was 37 years old and used his vast resources to quickly improve his game. We don't have any video footage of that, but we do have footage of him playing a charity basketball game against Michael Jordan in 1988. Anyway, Rogers once told the BBC all about his almost career in tennis.
I carried a tennis pro. I carried a couple of them with me on the road. Everywhere I went, I had my own plane, so we just flew from city to city, and we'd get into town and we'd play the pro and assistant pro at one of the clubs.
And so it went like that for as many as 8 hours a day for 10 years. Rogers told Rolling Stone that he, quote, developed a national ranking while I was on the road playing the Wimbledon champions. Did he, though? He also told the BBC,
I heard at one time, I thought I saw it, that I was ranked one notch above Bjorn Borg in the doubles.
Although Borg only ever played in one doubles match, Rogers also boasted that he had a serve that allowed him to stay competitive, quote, even with the pros. Sounds like the gambler may have been bluffing a little. Restaurants attract celebrities with cash to burn. Eatery co-owners like Jessica Biel and Ty Burrell generally put their money where their mouths might be, but most celebs don't incorporate their famous names into their establishments, unless you're Flavor Flav.
Welcome to FFC, Flay's Fried Chicken.
Or Kenny Rogers. He put his name front and center of Kenny Rogers Roasters, the chain of non-fried chicken joints marketed with the vaguely risque slogan,
it's the wood that makes it good.
In 1991, the first Kenny Rogers Roasters opened in Coral Springs, Florida, and within 3 years, the company had more than 100 outposts. While the chain grew to 425 locations, it was bankrupt by 1998 and was soon sold off. The last Roasters in the U.S., in Ontario, California, shut down in 2011, but the franchise still does hearty business in Asia, where the Chief Roasters franchisor bought the rights to the company outright in 2008. As one of the most successful and recognizable stars working in entertainment in the 1980s, it's not surprising that Kenny Rogers was offered a slew of endorsement deals, and he rejected almost all of them because they were primarily offers to lend his name and image to marketing campaigns for less than wholesome products. He told the Chicago Tribune in 1986, I've had offers to do commercials for cigarettes, beer, and liquor, and while I'm not passing moral judgment, I turned them down. But then came along an opportunity he couldn't refuse, either because of the product's non-controversial reputation or the insane amount of money he stood to earn. In 1986, Rogers signed his first endorsement, a 5-year contract to appear in advertisements for Dole products, particularly pineapple juice. It came about mostly because David Murdoch, the CEO of Dole's parent company, Castle & Cook, was friends with Rogers. Murdoch explained to the Chicago Tribune, I realized it would be a wonderful opportunity if we could get Kenny, but I didn't want to take advantage of a friend. As we got to talking money, I realized how expensive a friend could be. So how expensive? $17 million. By comparison, Pepsi only paid Michael Jackson $5 million to rep them, and that came just after Thriller. Along with fun country songs, Kenny Rogers found his niche singing unabashedly sentimental love songs for adults of a certain age. Lady, You Decorated My Life, and so on. He was a man who sang that which he knew. That is to say that Rogers had a complicated romantic history with 5 marriages to his name. His first, to Janice Gordon in his early 20s, lasted just 2 years and resulted in a son. His subsequent marriage to Jean Rogers lasted a bit longer, at 3 years, from 1960 to 1963. Number 3 seemed charming. He was with Margot Anderson from 1964 to 1976 and had 2 kids with her. His longest-lasting and best-known marriage came with actress Marianne Gordon, running from 1977 to 1993. Rogers' 5th marriage started in 1997. That's when he married Wanda Miller, mother of twin boys. It didn't get off on the best foot, however. There was a 28-year gap between Rogers and Miller, which freaked out Miller's parents.
Her mom's 2 years younger than me. Said, I want you to know I don't appreciate what you're doing with my daughter. And I said, you know what? I don't think I would either.
But in the end, he won them over with that Kenny Rogers charm. He boasted later in the same Fox Entertainment interview, now they're my best friends. By the late 1980s, the once solidly country Kenny Rogers had established himself as the king of the schmaltzy soft rock love ballad. It's impossible to count how many wedding DJs, anniversary party DJs, and adult contemporary radio DJs have spun Rogers' She Believes in Me and Through the Years. But Bette Midler could certainly have challenged Rogers for the title of soft rock royalty based solely on the enduring popularity of Wind Beneath My Wings. That BFF anthem definitely sounds like a Kenny Rogers song, and it almost was. In 2012, Rogers told Stuff.com that the Beaches soundtrack cut was offered to him, but he declined the chance to make it his own. He explained, "I heard it and something about it didn't sit right with me. I turned it down. Then I heard it when Bette did it and I went, wow, can't believe I turned that down." Donald Trump didn't earn the endorsement of all that many entertainment industry figures during his 2016 presidential campaign, so Kenny Rogers made headlines in December 2015 when he tactically endorsed Trump in the run-up to the Republican primaries, telling The Guardian, "I really like him. I think his problem is that he says what everyone wants to hear, but he doesn't say it well. I love what he says, I have to admit. He can be president and not owe anybody anything. He's one of the few people who has the money to do it and has the guts to do it." While Trump is a polarizing figure, it was probably far riskier for Rogers to compare him to Dolly Parton, someone beloved by almost everyone. Rogers and Parton are close friends, notably collaborating on the 1983 hit Islands in the Stream. In 2015, Rogers performed at Dollywood and discussed his eminently quotable host, saying, "She has no filter. If it goes in her mind, it comes out of her mouth. And that's what makes her special. She has become the Donald Trump of country music."
I love her. I love her for that. You never know what she's going to say, but it always comes from love.
In response, Parton quipped to Rolling Stone, quote, "Me and Donald kind of have the same hair." Kenny Rogers was a professional musician of some sort for 60 years, which means that he must have had scores of drunken tales of debauchery, right? In 2012, Rogers released his memoir, Luck or Something Like It, in which he recounted a childhood made stressful and unpredictable by a father who drank too much. He told Reuters, he was an alcoholic, but during that time, post-World War II, a lot of people were unemployed and ended up drinking. He couldn't really support his family, and I think it just broke him down. As a result, I never drank in my life. I saw it destroy him and saw it destroy other people I work with, so I made a conscious decision about this. But Rogers wasn't exactly straight edge. He admitted on Anderson Live that while he didn't do a lot of drugs, he did do some. He got turned off after embarrassing himself at a concert, recalling, "I smoked pot one night and I decided to talk on stage. I was having the time of my life. And I came off the stage and the guys in the band said, 'What were you talking about when you went off on this thing about the zoo?'" Most major musicians don't retire. They either fade into the obscurity of the casino and county fair circuit or die, or pretend to retire and then launch a comeback tour. But unfortunately for fans of Kenny Rogers and his deep-throated country pop, the singer had to call it quits in late 2017. He explained to Fox News,
You get out there, it's hard work. And I can't do it like I used to do it. And I swore that I would do this till I started embarrassing myself.
And so, in October 2017, the 79-year-old played his last concert in Nashville. All In for the Gambler featured a number of special guests, including Don Henley, Lionel Richie, and Dolly Parton, who sang Islands in the Stream with Rogers and then I Will Always Love You for Rogers. After that, Rogers embarked on a 2-year Gambler's Last Deal tour, although he had to cancel the final dates due to health issues. He really quit, too, proving he knew when to lay down the cards.
That's always been kind of a rub with me when people retire 10 times, you know. And I'm going out because I need to go out.
It's a cliche to say that a singer's personal life was like a country song, but for the legendary Tammy Wynette, it was literally true, as she used the turmoil of her failed marriages as fuel to create hit music. Here are tragic details about Tammy Wynette's life and loss. Tammy Wynette was born Virginia Wynette Pugh on her family's cotton farm in Itawamba County, Mississippi in 1942. Her father died of a brain tumor when she was less than a year old, and her mother moved away to find work, leaving Pugh in the care of her grandparents. By the age of 7, she was working alongside her family picking cotton. She taught herself how to play her father's guitar, longing for a way out of her hardscrabble life. By 17, she had married, and by 20, she had 2 children. The poverty was, if anything, even worse than before. Her husband was often unemployed, and they lived in an abandoned log house with no amenities. As dramatized in the 1981 film Stand By Your Man, the stress caused a mental breakdown, which was treated with electroshock therapy. Later discussing the treatments, Tammy Wynette said, quote, "They were horrible, but they helped me." In her late teens, Tammy Wynette's mother paid for her to go to beauty school, and she became a licensed beautician. People magazine reported that she told her skeptical classmates her dream of becoming a country music singer. One later remembered, "She was lousy then, real twangy. I never in a million years thought that girl would amount to anything." Even after Wynette reached superstardom, she kept her beautician's license up to date for the rest of her life as a fallback in case her music career fizzled out. After earning her beautician's license, Wynette left her husband and moved to Birmingham, Alabama. There was one bright spot in her life as she began singing on the local television program, The Country Boy Eddie Show, for $30 a week, waking up at 4 in the morning to perform before her 10-hour shifts as a beautician. The show's host, Eddie Burns, told Wynette, "The way you sing, you ought to go to Nashville." In 1966, despite a string of rejections from the country music industry, she followed his advice and moved to Nashville with no job, nowhere to live, and 3 small children to feed. Wynette's luck changed when she auditioned for producer Billy Sherrill at Epic Records, who liked her voice. Sherrill said that when he listened to her, quote, "a little teardrop every now and then appears." He signed her and suggested she rename herself Tammy, as she resembled the character played by Debbie Reynolds in the movie Tammy. She was a hit almost immediately. In 1966, she recorded her first single, a cover of the Bobby Austin hit Apartment No. 9. It peaked at number 44 on the Billboard Country chart in January of 1967. In May 1967, her first album was released, and the title track, Your Good Girl's Gonna Go Bad, hit number 3 on the Billboard Country charts. By the end of the year, she had 2 number-1 country singles, My Elusive Dreams, a duet with David Houston, and her first solo number-1 song, I Don't Wanna Play House, which also earned her a Grammy for Best Female Country and Western Solo Performance. A year later, Wynette recorded the song that would become not only her signature song, but one of the most famous songs in all of country music. Wynette and Billy Sherrill co-wrote Stand By Your Man in just 15 minutes and released it in 1968. It was another number-1 hit on the Billboard Country Singles chart and crossed over onto the pop chart as well, peaking at number 19. It also earned her a second and final Grammy, although she would ultimately be nominated 12 more times over the course of her long career. The song was controversial from the start, in part because the record label explicitly positioned it as a conservative repudiation of the feminist movement. Epic released an advertisement that read, "Tammy Wynette's answer to women's lib, stand by your man." Critics were not thrilled. Newsweek responded to the song by saying it was, quote, "for the beleaguered housewife who grits her teeth as destiny dumps its slop on her head." The controversy over the song never truly went away either. Wynette reportedly said, "It's unbelievable to me that a song that took me 20 minutes to write, I've spent 20 or 30 years defending." The controversy continued right up to 1992, when then-aspiring First Lady Hillary Clinton, addressing the latest rumors about her husband's philandering, famously quipped,
I'm not sitting here as some little woman standing by my man like Tammy Wynette."
Ironically, during the Stand By Your Man era, Tammy divorced her second husband, and in 1969 she married her third husband, country music star George Jones. The two met in a Nashville recording studio and got together after Jones declared his love for Wynette while she was literally in the middle of a fight with her second husband. They became an iconic country music couple, toured together as Mr. and Mrs. Country Music, had a daughter, country singer Georgette Jones, and recorded several chart-topping albums and duets together, such as We're Gonna Hold On and The Ceremony, in which they put their own wedding vows to music. Their marriage was stormy from start to finish, in part because of Jones's addictions to alcohol and cocaine. Wynette claimed that he once chased her with a rifle, and she described their dynamic as, quote, "I was naggin' and he was nippin'." Despite divorcing after just 6 years, they continued working together regularly through 1980 and even made a reunion album and toured together in 1995. At one show, according to People, Jones introduced his ex-wife by announcing, "I'm gonna bring out Miss Tammy Wynette now and see if we can get along for the first time in our lives." The 1970s were Tammy Wynette's golden age. Throughout her career, she had 20 number-1 hits and 39 top 10 Billboard country hits. The majority of these charted during the 70s, including Till I Can Make It on My Own, which she claimed was her favorite of her own songs. The song served as the title track of her first album recorded after her divorce from George Jones, and she shrewdly used the public's obsession with her personal life to fuel record sales. And her personal life remained dramatic. After her divorce from Jones, Wynette briefly dated fellow 70s icon Burt Reynolds and married Nashville real estate tycoon Michael Tomlin. The marriage lasted just 44 days. In 1978, Wynette married her fifth and final husband, George Ritchie, who worked as her manager for the rest of her career and with whom she co-wrote several songs, including, ironically, Till I Can Make It on My Own. She told people, "I made a lot of mistakes, but thank God I finally got it right." But things weren't necessarily as rosy as they seemed. On a Fox radio podcast in 2017, daughter Georgette Jones described two separate 1976 incidents, one in which someone broke into their house and, quote, turned on every faucet, every sink, every bathtub, every shower in the entire house so the house was flooded. And there was another incident in which Georgette was sleeping in her mother's bedroom when that part of the house caught on fire and the entire back portion of the house we had to close off. It was completely burned away. An even more bizarre incident took place in 1978. In a terrifying incident, Wynette claimed that she'd been abducted at gunpoint from a parking lot and that her kidnappers beat her and left her on the side of the road. Wynette gave interviews describing her ordeal in which she had visible bruises on her face and a fractured cheekbone. The identity of her kidnappers remained a mystery. Many years later, however, Wynette's daughter Jackie Daly wrote in her memoir that her mother had made it all up to cover up that her attacker had actually been her fifth husband, George Ritchie. Ritchie denied the allegations, but it would not be the last time he would face accusations from his stepdaughters regarding their mother. Wynette also dealt with other serious health problems throughout most of her adult life. According to Village's News, a hysterectomy after the birth of her fourth daughter left her with an infection that caused painful scarring and permanent intestinal symptoms. Around the same time, Wynette developed an obstruction in her bile ducts that damaged her gallbladder and caused further abdominal pain. She also endured multiple surgeries, including one on her kidneys, and her vocal cords when she developed nodules that needed removal. She often couldn't perform without first taking painkillers to manage the amount of pain her body endured, and at times she had to rely on backup singers to sing her parts. In 1986, she entered the Betty Ford Center to treat her addiction to painkillers, later telling People magazine, "I never took cocaine or marijuana or even speed. I just needed something to ease pain. And stupidly, I just flat overdid it." In 1995, a near-fatal liver ailment sent her to the hospital again, about which she said, "I was just that far from being dead. I had no pain, I wasn't scared, it was all just very peaceful. I felt like I was floating somewhere." Ironically, this painful experience caused some healing in her personal life. After not speaking for several years, George Jones visited his ex-wife in the hospital, and they resumed a friendship as well as a working relationship, which led to a reunion album and tour. In 1992, Tammy Wynette made an unexpected return to the Billboard Hot 100 by providing vocals for the song Justified and Ancient, Stand by the Jams by British electronic duo The KLF. The KLF are notorious for such antics as announcing their departure from the music business in 1992 via a performance at the Brit Awards, during which they fired machine gun blanks into the audience. They later left a dead sheep on the steps of the hotel hosting an after-show party, burned £1 million in cash, and deleted their entire music catalog for 30 years. According to Dangerous Minds, band member Jimmy Cauty suggested using Wynette on a song, and his partner Bill Drummond, a fan of Wynette and country music in general, agreed. He flew to Tennessee to meet with Tammy and ask her to collaborate. Drummond later called the project an evil and corrupt exchange, the young artist wanting to tap into the mythical status and credibility of the has-been wanting some of that "I'm still contemporary, relevant, will do anything to get back into the charts" stuff. Nevertheless, Wynette called the experience, quote, "the most rewarding thing I've ever done outside of country music," and fondly recounted making the music video for Entertainment Weekly. "I was perched 50 feet in the air dressed as a queen, with a bunch of Zulu dancers around me, Japanese girls with long blonde wigs, and of course, Bill and Jimmy." On April 6, 1998, Wynette passed away in her sleep at her home at the age of 55. The cause of death was presumed to be a blood clot in her lung. Wynette worked right up until the end of her life. Her final concert appearance took place on March 5, 1998, when she filled in for ill fellow country music legend Loretta Lynn, while her final television appearance was 4 days later on the Nashville Network's Primetime Country. Publicist and friend Evelyn Shriver told People magazine, quote, "She deserved an easy death. She had a tough life." Controversy followed Tammy Wynette even after she was no longer around to endure it. Per Country Living, Wynette's daughter Georgette Jones blamed her stepfather George Ritchie for her mother's untimely death, stating that by encouraging Wynette to overuse painkillers, he was indirectly responsible for her demise. She also claimed that he tried very hard to separate Mom from her family and friends so he could be the only person she could turn to. I think she felt like she had no choice, and it was too difficult to fight. 3 of Wynette's daughters filed a $50 million wrongful death lawsuit against Richie. According to CMT News, her body was exhumed and examined, with the results confirming Wynette had died of natural causes. Wynette's daughters dropped the lawsuit in 1999.
An onboard computer reveals a tragic truth. A note raises more questions than it answers, and a pet is sent on in hopes of an afterlife reunion. What other clues have been left behind at famous country death scenes? When Patsy Cline was killed in a plane crash on March 5, 1963, she had only been singing for a surprisingly short time. The crash took the life of the 30-year-old Cline, along with fellow country music stars Hawkshaw Hawkins and Cowboy Copas, and Cline's manager, Randy Hughes, who was also the plane's pilot. The cause of the crash was officially ruled as having been due to pilot inexperience and bad weather, and it was bad weather that Cline had been aware of. The oft-told tale is that even as she waved aside concerns over her flight from Kansas City back home to Nashville, she reportedly told Dottie West, "Don't worry about me, Haas. When it's my time to go, it's my time to go." In 1996, a show called Friends & Company did a retrospective on the crash site and interviewed one of the first people on the scene. Jerry Pfeiffer shared that the entire crash site was strewn with their gear, from clothes to guitars, amplifiers, and equipment.
It was a very dreadful scene and something I'd never experienced before and hope never see again.
Some of the items recovered from the crash site have been included in exhibits about her life, including a lighter in the shape of a Confederate flag and a watch given to her by her husband. Hughes's journal was also recovered from the site, documenting the last of the singer's tour dates. John Denver was killed on October 12, 1997, when the plane he was flying crashed not far off the coast of California. It took more than a year for the National Transportation Safety Board to finalize its report on what had happened. Interestingly, there were several significant things that weren't recovered at the scene, including the logbook and the autopilot. The plane was, however, recovered piecemeal but mostly complete, and initially, 2 things seemed to point to a possible cause of the crash. The windscreen was shattered into pieces, and there were a lot of duck feathers found. Given that the seat cushions were labeled as being filled with goose feathers, not duck, that led to the initial theory that bird impacts had caused the crash. After consulting with experts from the Museum of Natural History, it was found that the label wasn't entirely right, and the cushions included duck feathers too. That possibility eliminated, it was later ruled that the inconvenient location of the handle that toggled between fuel tanks, behind the pilot, was ultimately responsible, and that Denver had lost control while trying to move the handle. When Hank Williams Sr. died at the incredibly young age of just 29 years old, 20,000 people attended his funeral. What happened in the hours around his death, just as 1952 became 1953, is part history, part myth. Williams had been on his way to Canton, Ohio, when he died in the back of his Cadillac, which was being driven by a college student he'd hired to get him to his concert after bad weather made flying impossible. That college student turned driver was Charles Carr, and in 2002, he sat down with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution to talk about that fateful night. Carr recalled helping Williams, dressed in white boots and a hat with a blue coat, load his gear into the Cadillac, and picking up a 6-pack of Falstaff beer. Although they had intended to stop for the night, the concert promoter told them that they needed to keep going to make it on time, so they did. Carr was in West Virginia when, troubled by the eerie silence, he pulled over and went back to check on Williams. The blanket he'd been covered with had slipped off, and Carr knew he had to find a hospital. When his body was removed from the car later, some full cans were still there, along with a few empty ones. Also in the car were notes Williams had written, with unfinished song lyrics. Carr recalled the last words Williams said, to anyone who heard anything at least, "I just want to get some sleep." There are a few different stories about what happened on the night Tammy Wynette died, and they're recounted in Jimmy McDonough's biography, Tammy Wynette, Tragic Country Queen. What is known is that Wynette died at home on a sofa on April 6, 1998. According to the testimony her then-husband George Ritchie gave to the press, he and Wynette had been napping on the sofa in the kitchen when his daughter called at 6:55 p.m. He then saw a note taped to the kitchen table that the housekeeper had left at 6:05 p.m., saying she was running to the store. When Ritchie returned to the sofa, he discovered Wynette had died. Ritchie, however, had previously told police that both he and the housekeeper had found her body, raising questions about the housekeeper's note. Ritchie called Wynette's personal physician, Wallace Marsh, in Pittsburgh. In the time it took for the doctor to reach Nashville, Wynette remained on the sofa. Friends, family, and Wynette's daughters came in and out of the home, and according to Ritchie, an unnamed acquaintance removed all of Wynette's medical records, prescriptions, and paraphernalia from the scene. but what happened to them remains unclear. Marsh certified that Wynette's cause of death was a blood clot in her lungs, but her daughters were unconvinced. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Marsh and Ritchie. Wynette's body was exhumed and an autopsy was performed. It was ruled that the cause of death had actually been heart failure, caused most likely by blood clots that had previously collected in her lungs. Naomi Judd died by suicide on the day before she and her daughter, Winona Judd, were due to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Her death started a very important conversation about how much the public is entitled to know and how much privacy should be respected. Not 2 weeks had passed since Judd's April 30th, 2022 death, when her daughter Ashley Judd sat down with Diane Sawyer. Ashley said that she had been put forward as the family's spokesperson, as they knew that information was going to be made public and they wanted to speak before that happened.
When we're talking about mental illness, it's very important and to be clear and to make the distinction between our loved one and the disease.
By August, the family was involved in a highly publicized court case in an attempt to keep the details of Naomi's death private. Although they were initially granted a temporary verdict, confirming that things like official investigation reports and photos were not to be released, they ultimately were. Outlets including the New York Post and Radar Online ultimately ran photos of Naomi's bed, showing the hurriedly written post-it note she also left behind. Since then, Ashley has spearheaded a movement to prioritize sensitive reporting and allow families to keep images, recordings, and evidence private. She told The Guardian, "The dark past in God's hands becomes our greatest asset. With it, we can avert misery and death for others." Ricky Nelson was the son of stars Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, and a massive genre-crossing star in his own right. He, his fiancée, and other band members were killed in a plane crash on January 1st, 1986, and just what happened was, from the beginning, sketchy and misreported. Initial reports confirmed his death without getting into too much detail, saying that whatever had happened on the flight, it had caused a fire to burn so hot that rescue workers had to wait to recover remains. It didn't take long for the headlines to start the chatter. Nelson's manager, Greg McDonald, and brother David Nelson both issued statements saying that early reports claiming the fire had broken out because the plane's passengers were freebasing cocaine were completely untrue. The reports ran in multiple reputable media outlets, while officials replied that nothing had actually been determined at the time the news hit. At that early stage, they did confirm that while aerosol cans had been found at the site, they had been in the baggage compartment, discounting the drug theory. It was later reported that the likely cause of the blaze, crash, and deaths was a faulty heater on board the plane. And perhaps strangest of all was the fact that when the investigation was finished, some of the wreckage, including the tail of the plane, was left behind at the crash site. It was eventually installed at the Williams House Museum in DeKalb, Texas. When Justin Townes Earle's death was announced in 2020, there was no cause of death officially released, but it wasn't long before the New York Times reported that the autopsy findings had led to a determination that he had died of an accidental drug overdose. The toxicology report found that he had cocaine and fentanyl in his system, and it was in line with information Fox News had obtained from the Metro Nashville Police Department's Don Aaron. While Aaron didn't reveal exactly what first responders had found, he did say, "The preliminary investigation, which takes into account observations at the scene, indicates that death is likely related to a drug overdose." Earle's father, outlaw country star Steve Earle, later recorded and released an album of his son's songs, and those recordings started even before the official cause of death had been issued. He called the album cathartic and noted that he had been all too familiar with his son's addictions. He recalled their last phone call. "I said, 'Do not make me bury you,' and he said, 'I won't.'"
No trouble figuring out what the worst year of my life is, and that's saying something.
On September 4th, 2019, sheriffs and first responders from Taos County, New Mexico, responded to an accident scene involving 3 cars. 2 women were dead, and in a pre-investigation statement to Taos News, Sheriff Jerry Hogreff didn't pull any punches. "At this time, I will say with most certainty that Miss Cruz was an innocent victim of this senseless crash caused by Miss Harris. Miss Cruz was 16-year-old Maria Elena Cruz, who had been driving home from work when the crash occurred. Harris was on her way to a music festival when she clipped the car in front of her and crossed into the opposite lane, hitting Cruz in a head-on collision. Making the story even more tragic is the fact that Cruz's father, a deputy fire chief, had been driving along the same stretch of road when he came upon the accident.
Very traumatic for him to not know, but to respond anyway, and then find that it was his family member.
Details of exactly what happened came from 2 places: Harris's autopsy and the onboard computer recovered from her car at the scene. While the autopsy revealed that she had been driving with a blood alcohol content of more than 3 times the legal limit, the computer revealed details just as telling. Harris's speed at the time of the impact with the first car was recorded at 102 miles per hour. And at the time she hit Cruz's car, she was clocked at 95 miles per hour.
I have never in my entire life had, up until a certain point, never had a suicidal thought.
After country music star Mindy McCready died by suicide in 2013, news outlets across the country recounted her tumultuous recent history, including her fight for custody of her son, arrest for drunk driving, her high-profile involvement in the 2010 season of Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, and the death of her boyfriend, producer David Wilson. Her death came 1 month after Wilson also died by suicide, and according to reports, they were both discovered on the front porch of their home. Also found at the scene of her death was the body of the dog she shared with Wilson, and reports said that the dog had been shot and killed prior to her death. A friend of McCready's, Dan O'Hanks, spoke with E! News to explain that he didn't believe she had killed the dog out of despair, but love. Her discussions about leaving her life wasn't that she wanted to end her life, but she wanted to join David, and David loved that dog, and so she'd be taking the dog with her. Hanks also added that McCready had reached out to him the day prior to her death, and he said that it was an important lesson that everyone could take away with them. I wish I had been more alert to what it was. Everybody wants to reach out after the fact, but nobody wants to be there when it is happening. If you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please dial or text 988 to speak with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can also seek help by visiting 988lifeline.org.
Jackie Keith Whitley was a country musician who rose to fame in the 1980s. However, his career was cut short when he died at only 33 years old. Whitley was born in Kentucky, and he won a talent contest at just 4 years old. He honed his craft, learned to play the guitar, and already had a band at 13 years old. In the late 1960s, Whitley joined a bluegrass group, the Clinch Mountain Boys, and recorded 7 studio albums with them. However, he decided to leave the group in 1973, and from there, he worked with various acts and bands before embarking on a solo career in 1982. Whitley released his first solo album, titled Hard Act to Follow, in 1984, but he didn't have much success at first. That didn't stop the singer from releasing a second album the next year. LA to Miami did much better on the music charts, and Whitley had 3 top 10 hits. As his reputation and fame grew in the country music scene, Whitley recorded a third album, Don't Close Your Eyes, which was released in 1988. 3 singles from the album were #1 hits, and it seemed like his music career was right on track.
The highest new debuting record last week in Billboard came in at 53, and my records used to stop there, so I'm really excited about it.
That all stopped, however, when he died suddenly on May 9, 1989. His death came as a shock to the music world, especially when his cause of death was finally revealed to the public. Behind his success in music, Jackie Keith Whitley was struggling with his alcoholism. According to the Associated Press, he even admitted his drinking problems in an interview, claiming that he'd stopped drinking because it was, quote, a matter of life and death. Whitley said that he stopped drinking in 1987 after he got married to fellow country singer Lorrie Morgan. However, it seemed that he wasn't able to remain sober, and he eventually died from alcohol poisoning. According to reports, he was found dead after a weekend of drinking. The morning of his death, he was scheduled to go and play golf with his brother-in-law, and it was he who found him dead in bed, his system overwhelmed by alcohol abuse. According to the autopsy performed after Whitley's death, he had an alcohol level of 0.47 in his bloodstream, 5 times the legal limit for intoxication in Tennessee at the time. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy concluded that Whitley had consumed far too much alcohol over a very short period of time. In addition to alcohol, his urine test also came out positive for cocaine and benzodiazepines, which may have contributed to his death. However, it was the alcohol consumption that was ultimately the main cause. His official cause of death was listed as acute ethanolism, according to autopsy files. Just before he died, Jackie Keith Whitley finished work on his 4th solo album, titled I Wonder Do You Think of Me? The album was released after his death, and the title song rose to become a #1 hit. The music world mourned the loss of Whitley, and his wife Lorrie Morgan coped with the loss by gathering fellow country music stars to record Keith Whitley, a tribute album, released in 1994. She also kept his memory alive by releasing other music that Whitley was able to record before his death. In 2019, Whitley's legacy in the country music world was celebrated on the 30th anniversary of his death. Country music stars, including Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood, among others, performed Whitley's songs to a packed audience at the CMA Theater in Nashville, Tennessee. There was also an exhibit that displayed instruments, clothes, and other memorabilia that Whitley owned. Despite his short life, Whitley is still remembered as a great country singer who became an influence to other country music stars. Jesse Keith Whitley, Morgan and Jackie Keith Whitley's son, followed in his parents' footsteps and is also a singer-songwriter. Though he works in the southern rock genre rather than country, he feels that his father would approve of his music, telling Taste of Country that he feels his father would say he's on the, quote, right path. He pays tribute to his father by singing some of his songs during performances.
Over the course of his life, people tried to define Merle Haggard's sound in many different ways, from classic country to the Bakersfield sound to outlaw country. But whatever niche you try to put Haggard in, odds are that he would break out of it eventually. After all, he spent his whole life escaping from the boxes people put him in, often literally. Haggard's youth sounds like something out of a country song, which makes sense considering many of his hits were inspired by the realities of his hardscrabble life. His family moved to California during the Great Depression and lived in a converted boxcar. When Haggard was a child, his father died and he began acting out. By 13, he was serving his first stint in a juvenile detention center, but it was far from his last. In and out of detention facilities, he ran away from home, hopping a freight train and traveling the country before returning to California, only to face more jail time. He kept getting arrested and kept escaping from prison, one after the other. In 1957, though, he pushed his luck too far. Now 18, he was sentenced to a real prison for adult offenders, San Quentin Prison, a maximum security penal institution not far from San Francisco. And with his reputation as an escape artist, they weren't taking any chances with Haggard.
With my reputation of escape, they wouldn't let me out of the cell after 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Because you'd escaped so many times previously.
Yeah.
And he was determined to escape from San Quentin as well. But a meeting with a death row inmate helped scare him straight, especially after Haggard's cellmate, whom he had planned to escape with, busted out of the prison only to be dragged back in irons for execution after shooting a cop during the jailbreak. Suddenly, escaping didn't seem like such a good idea. But there was another escape available to Haggard: music. After 18 months in San Quentin, he was finally allowed some measure of freedom inside the jail and began playing music with other inmates. Then came an incident that changed his life. In 1959, Johnny Cash visited San Quentin for his first prison concert. Though his 1969 visit would become one of his most famous performances, that first prison concert at San Quentin was just as legendary, for in the crowd was Haggard, who was inspired by Cash to take up country music as a career and life vocation. Haggard said in his autobiography, he had the right attitude. He chewed gum, looked arrogant, and flipped the bird to the guards. He did everything the prisoners wanted to do. He was a mean mother from the South who was there because he loved us. When he walked away, everyone in that place had become a Johnny Cash fan. Haggard, who had learned to play guitar as a youth after his brother gave him a 6-string as a gift, soon joined the prison's country music band and started to hone his songwriting and performance skills. In 1960, Haggard was paroled after serving 2 years of his sentence. He quickly got a record deal and his career took off. Haggard was one of the pioneers of what they called the Bakersfield sound, a version of country music that was more honky-tonk and rock-inspired than the slick, overproduced music coming out of Nashville at the time. The country legend went on to score 38 #1 hits on the Billboard country charts, many of which crossed over into the mainstream. And in the 1970s, his insistence on working outside of the Nashville establishment made him an important voice in the outlaw country movement. And as for his prison record, after many years of keeping it a secret, Haggard eventually revealed it to the world in 1969 on The Johnny Cash Show, supported by his idol. 3 years later, the then governor of California, Ronald Reagan, gave Haggard a full unconditional pardon. Haggard went on to become a Kennedy Center honoree, won a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and was inducted into both the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Country Music Hall of Fame. Bob Dylan called him, quote, Herculean, while Willie Nelson said he was, quote, one of the best. Sadly, after a bout with double pneumonia, Haggard died on his 79th birthday, April 6, 2016.
Dolly Parton is one of the most famous, most successful, and most universally beloved performers in American history. Parton wasn't born into showbiz. She came from humble beginnings, and she wasn't alone. Parton is one of 12 children, all of whom have their own story to tell. Dolly Parton is the 4th oldest sibling in a family that would come to include a total of 12 children born to Robert and Abby Lee Parton. Robert Lee Parton came from a long line of farmers, and early in adulthood, he toiled as a sharecropper. By the time Dolly turned 5 in 1951, Lee had acquired his own parcel of land in Sevier County, Tennessee, which he used to farm tobacco and raise livestock. To help fund his large family's needs, he also worked in construction. The patriarch of the Parton family died in August 2003 at age 79 after suffering from a series of strokes. His death preceded 80-year-old Avie Lee's by 4 months. The couple married in 1939 when Avie, raised in a family of musicians and the daughter of a South Carolina preacher, was just 19 years old. While Dolly Parton was storming her way up the country charts over and over again in the 1960s and 1970s, her younger sister Stella Parton was right there behind her. Not only has she formed her own record label, but since the early 70s, she's released more than 30 albums full of country, traditional, and spiritual music, with her most fruitful and prominent period of success coming in the 70s and 80s. Stella scored a long string of moderate and minor hits on Billboard's country chart, including the 1975 top 10 single I Want to Hold You in My Dreams Tonight, followed by top 20 smashes like Standard Line No. 1, The Danger of a Stranger, and 4 Little Letters. How does Stella's voice sound? Some might say a lot like that of Dolly, which helped offer audiences a seamless transition when Stella starred in a touring production of the musical The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, just after Dolly headlined the film version. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, country went pop thanks to the John Travolta movie Urban Cowboy and performers with mainstream appeal like Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton. In the wake of that, Dolly's brother Randy Parton signed a deal with RCA Records and released a few recordings. In 1982, he appeared on the country showcase show Pop Goes the Country to perform Roll On 18-Wheeler, a rock-tinged tune about a long-haul trucker. That song wasn't a hit for Randy, but in 1984, Alabama covered it and took it to number 1 on the country chart. In the early 80s, he had a few moderate successes of his own, such as the top 30 hits Hold Me Like You Never Had Me and Shot Full of Love. As the decade progressed, Randy collaborated with his very successful sister more, playing bass in her live band and backing her up as a member of the Cut and Slice Band in her 1984 musical comedy Rhinestone. In the mid-2000s, Randy struck a lucrative deal with the city of Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, which paid him a $1.5 million annual salary to manage and perform at the Randy Parton Theater, the centerpiece of a planned entertainment complex. He also got a fully furnished home and a use of a car in the deal. By 2008, Randy had left the project after a series of business disagreements. He passed away in January 2021. Beginning in his early 20s, Floyd Parton toiled as a songwriter in the Nashville country music scene for years. Some of his biggest successes arrived when his big-voiced older sister took a hold of him. Floyd and Dolly Parton's collaborative composition Nickels and Dimes was included on the latter's 1978 album Heartbreaker, and Floyd alone wrote Waltz Me to Heaven, a soundtrack cut from Dolly's 1984 movie Rhinestone. In 1991, Dolly and Ricky Van Shelton made a duet out of Floyd's Rockin' Years, which went all the way to number 1 on the country chart. Floyd also wrote songs for George Jones and 2 of his other musically inclined family members, Stella and his twin sister Frida. Floyd passed away in December 2018 at the age of 61. Dolly Parton gave acting a shot in the 1980s, starting with 9 to 5, a dark comedy about workplace revenge co-starring Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. Released in 1980, the film earned $103 million, meaning it was popular enough for ABC to adapt it into a sitcom in 1982. Parton was a little too busy and famous to reprise her role as Dorothy Rhodes, so producers instead cast 22-year-old Hollywood newcomer Rachel Dennison. She bore an uncanny resemblance to Parton, which is to be expected since Dennison is Parton's younger sister. Prior to her role on TV's 9 to 5, Dennison worked as a makeup artist for her superstar sibling. She got her chance at TV stardom when Jane Fonda visited Parton at the Grand Ole Opry in 1981. Upon meeting her sister, Fonda thought Dennison would be perfect for the sitcom adaptation of 9 to 5, which she was producing. She told People, "I asked Dolly's permission to bring Rachel out to read for the part. As soon as she stepped foot on the lot, everyone started calling, asking who she was." 9 to 5 lasted 5 seasons, with Dennison appearing in all 85 episodes, but after the show wrapped in 1988, she never acted again. More than a decade younger than her celebrity sister, Frida Parton left the family home in Tennessee at age 13 to go live with Dolly Parton in Nashville. Not yet 20, she married Mark Anderson, part of Dolly's backing band, and together they'd collaborate on Sing for the Common Man, a track which appeared on her sister's 1980 album 9 to 5 and Odd Jobs. Soon after, Frida landed a record deal and released her debut LP Two-Faced in 1984. Unlike her musically inclined siblings, Frida didn't show much interest in country and its associated genres. Two-Faced is a pretty heavy hard rock album. Outside of music, Frida has lived a colorful life. As of 2014, she's been married and divorced 4 times, but still believes in love, opening and subsequently managing and performing services at the Parton Family Wedding Chapel in Sevierville, Tennessee. Dolly Parton has always proudly embraced her heritage as a member of a big family from rural Tennessee. Her sister, Willadine Parton, emerged as the family's historian, capturing in print the Partons' collective childhoods and along the way becoming a chronicler of a broader culture at large. Usually going by the pen name of simply Willadine, the author in the family has published 3 books: In the Shadow of a Song, The Story of the Parton Family in 1985, Smoky Mountain Memories, Stories from the Hearts of the Parton Family in 1996, and All Day Singing and Dinner on the Ground in 1997, a collection of stories and classic Southern recipes. In 2013, Dolly Parton made a special appearance at her Dollywood theme park and entertainment complex to unveil a new section of the Chasing Rainbows Museum, one dedicated to her maternal uncle Bill Owens, her first manager and champion of her musical skills. Standing beside him at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, she recalled, "He saw me when I was just a little thing, singing my songs and doing my stuff, saying, 'Hey, I think we can make some money at this.'"
So he's actually been the one that's helped me more than anybody else through the years.
Parton was about 10 years old and washing dishes when Owens, a singer, songwriter, and guitar player, took notice. As he later said, "I thought she could be a star the first time I heard her in that kitchen." Before long, he took her to sing on the Cass Walker Show, a Knoxville, Tennessee-based radio variety show. Producers were so impressed they hired Parton to be a regular performer, and Dolly realized she'd found the thing that she was going to do for the rest of her life. When Parton got a bit older, she started writing songs with Owens, and they landed a deal with Combine Music, then formed their own music publishing company, Opar. One of the duo's first and biggest professional successes came when country star Bill Phillips recorded hit versions of their songs The Company You Keep and Put It Off Until Tomorrow. As Parton became a major star in the 1970s, Owens continued to strike it big as a songwriter, penning tunes for the likes of Loretta Lynn, Ricky Skaggs, Crystal Gayle, and Kris Kristofferson. A.B. Lee Parton was a mother of 12 by the time she was 35, and so she delegated child-rearing duties of some of the younger kids to some of her older kids. At a 2015 press event promoting Coat of Many Colors, the TV movie about her childhood in Tennessee, Parton told reporters about the way that kids chipped in to help raise each other. "My mother, through the years, when we were born, since there were so many of us, used to say, 'This one is going to be you, baby.' That just meant that you got to take extra care of it. You have to get up with it at night and rock it back and forth." Upon his birth in July 1955, newborn Larry Parton was assigned in such a manner to Dolly, age 9 at the time. Tragically, the newest addition to the Parton brood suffered from health problems, and just 4 days after he was born, he passed away. Parton said that it was tough to address and relive the heartache surrounding Larry's death when it was depicted on screen in Coat of Many Colors. But in life, she said, even pain is worth it. As she put it, "All things are hard, but that's what makes your memories. That's what makes you who and what you are." Born into a huge family, Dolly Parton didn't grow up to have a big brood of her own. She never had biological children, but that suited her just fine. Parton told People Country, "Several of my brothers and sisters came to live with me early on in my life. I've loved their kids just like they're my grandkids." She also added that her many nieces and nephews have a nickname for her, Aunt Granny. One of those nieces is singer Heidi Parton. Daughter of Randy Parton and his wife Deb, Heidi started regularly performing at her aunt's Dollywood theme park at the age of 4 up until she turned 19. Sadly, the Parton family lost one of its own in 2017. Teaver Parton, Dolly Parton's niece and Heidi Parton's older sister, passed away at age 36 in March 2017. Dolly Parton makes a lot of public appearances, but generally does them alone. It's not that the enchanting singer is forever single. She's been married to her first and only husband, Carl Dean, since 1966, a man who doesn't want to have anything to do with show business. Parton's husband is so rarely photographed that some have theorized that he doesn't actually exist. Speaking about her spouse, Parton told Entertainment Tonight, "A lot of people have thought that through the years because he does not want to be in the spotlight at all. It's just not who he is. He's like a quiet, reserved person, and he figured if he ever got out there in that, he'd never get a minute's peace, and he's right about that. When they do go out together," she says, "it's not to gallivant around the world. Instead, it's to take private little adventures in their RV to do things like hit up the Taco Bell drive-thru, which Dean has plenty of time to do ever since he retired from running his asphalt paving business."
How could you what's your secret? I said, well, I stay gone. It's like it stays new. Actually, my husband's a homebody, and I love to travel.
At least one of Parton's most famous songs is about her husband. Her 1973 hit Jolene concerned a redheaded temptress with designs on the narrator's man, and the singer begs and pleads to not steal him away with her wiles and beauty beyond compare. While Jolene's name and appearance came from a young fan Parton met in the 1960s, the character is based on a bank teller who flirted heavily with Dean. Parton told NPR's All Things Considered, "She got this terrible crush on my husband, and he just loved going to the bank because she paid him so much attention. It was kind of like a running joke between us." Not every member of Dolly Parton's large family sought a career in entertainment. Unlike the Jackson family from nearby Indiana, in which every kid gave music a try, a few of the Partons of Tennessee hung back and have lived private, quiet lives, at least compared to Dolly, the music legend, movie star, and theme park entrepreneur. Among them, Cassie Nan Parton dabbles in music, and in 2013, she performed alongside her more outgoing siblings in My People, a live show at Dollywood. She also has a brother named Bobby Lee Parton, who stayed in Tennessee, as well as another brother named Coy Denver Parton, the father of 2 daughters, one of whom he named Dolly. What's the story behind Patsy Cline's stage name? When and where did her breakout performance happen? She's one of the biggest names in country music history, and this is her tragic true story. Patsy Cline was born Virginia Patterson Hensley on September 8, 1932. Her mother, Hilda Patterson Hensley, was just 16 years old when Ginny was born, while her father, Sam Hensley, was already in his 40s. Times were tough for the Hensleys in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia during the Great Depression, but music was a constant. Sam could barely provide his family with running water or an indoor toilet, yet a radio was always there, as was sometimes a piano. Hensleys moved often so that Sam could make a living as a blacksmith, about 19 times before Ginny turned 15. The young girl took to music naturally, learning to play the piano by ear and finding her voice at an early age. As family friend Randolph Robinson recalled in the biography Honky Tonk Angel, the intimate story of Patsy Cline, "I can still see her now as a 5- and 6-year-old, skipping down the street, singing at the top of her voice. Already she possessed the sassiness and the knowledge that she was someone special." Her father was an amateur singer himself, but unfortunately, he was also reportedly abusive. Patsy Cline once admitted, "I can't read a note of music, and I never took a singing lesson in my life." Nevertheless, she had dreams of making it all the way to the Grand Ole Opry and into the homes of millions. But folks around town often reminded her not only that achieving fame was hard, but also that it was nearly impossible for someone growing up on the other side of the tracks. That didn't stop her. Instead, young Ginny Hensley drew on those hardships and even turned her first brush with death into a musical advantage. At 13, she suffered a serious throat infection and was diagnosed with rheumatic fever. The disease can have long-term effects on the heart, joints, and brain if left untreated. It's rare nowadays, but back then it was much more common and often fatal. Ultimately, this episode proved motivational. As Cline was quoted in the book Honky Tonk Angel, "The doctor put me in an oxygen tent. You might say it was my return to the living after several days that launched me as a singer." At the age of 14, a confident Patsy Cline, still known as Virginia Hensley, walked into her local radio station in her hometown of Winchester, Virginia. She got an audition on the spot and landed her first singing gig, but that local fame didn't lead to instant renown. Her father and mother split up when Patsy was 16. Some say it was because of infidelity and drinking, but more likely it was due to Sam's transient work and Hilda's desire to put down roots. Young Ginny moved with her mother and 2 siblings into a house without running water or electricity in a blue-collar neighborhood of Winchester. To make ends meet, Hilda worked as a seamstress, while Ginny found messy work in a poultry plant, plucking chickens, scrubbing the Greyhound bus station, and jerking sodas at a local drugstore. She enrolled in the local high school but never attended. As Barbara Hall, director of the documentary Patsy Cline, American Masters, told PBS NewsHour, "This is a woman who barely had an 8th grade education, came from a single-parent home, worked to make ends meet to help feed the family, and still figured out how to work the music business."
We're all here because of her music.
By 1952, Virginia Patterson Hensley was touring local clubs regularly in the Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C. area with bandleader Bill Pierce and his group, the Melody Boys and Girls. Pierce had encouraged her to take on a stage name, so Patsy, an homage to her middle name, was starting to emerge. It wasn't until she met and married Gerald Cline a year later, though, that Patsy Cline fully came into being. At the time, she wasn't just Bill Pierce's musical partner, but also his lover, and they carried on their affair throughout her marriage to Gerald. By 1955, Patsy Cline was a regional star, now appearing on local variety shows that attracted D.C. politicians as much as country folk. All the while, she kept her sights on Nashville, while Gerald kept his eyes on making a home. He worked, she played gigs, and they passed like ships in the night. Eventually, the marriage hardly existed anymore. As he recalled in Honky Tonk Angel, "It was her way or not at all, and that wasn't fair to me. For a long time, I tried, but got nothing in return." For Patsy's part, she said, "In the beginning, Gerald and I had a good marriage as marriages go. My problem was that I don't think I knew what love was." By 1957, the marriage was over, but Patsy's new surname stuck. Patsy Cline needed a strong voice and an equally strong attitude to break through the male-dominated country music scene. One time, when she asked for a raise from the variety show Town and Country Time, she was told that she was, quote, being paid more than enough for a woman in the business. In 1954, Cline signed with 4-Star Records, an independent label owned by William McCall, a talent scout who didn't exactly have the best reputation. This would turn out to be one of her biggest mistakes of her career. The contract limited her to recording only songs that McCall owned the publishing rights to so that he could make money off the rights and the record. She recorded 4 records with 4-Star, all while struggling to pay her bills. Cline's personal letters and documents show that when her contract ended, she owed the label nearly $5,000 and had hardly earned any royalties, only about 2%, despite recording the hit song Walkin' After Midnight during that time. In 1956, with steady though meager earnings from Town and Country Time, Patsy Cline needed money just to keep food on the table. Having received no royalties from Four Star, she signed for another year with the label on the promise of a quick $200, a decision that did nothing more than prolong a bad deal. She went from gig to gig on a rickety old bus, sometimes traveling 12 hours at a time as she worked well into the early morning hours on a pittance. Then, in the spring of that year, she met Charlie Dick. Charlie had a reputation for drinking and fighting, as well as being a ladies' man. It didn't get much better when he got together with Cline. According to the book Sweet Dreams, The World of Patsy Cline, their fights were legendary. They married in 1957, and later that year, Dick was drafted into the Army. Cline gave birth to their first child, a daughter, in 1958, and she was, for all intents and purposes, a working single mother struggling to pay the bills. Patsy Cline's breakout performance happened in 1957 when she earned her way onto the CBS show Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. It was basically the American Idol of its day with a sizable national audience, and she made it on thanks to a little lie. Godfrey required that only professional scouts and not family members bring talent to him to perform on the show. So Hilda Hensley posed as her daughter's talent scout and introduced Cline to the Godfrey audience without ever mentioning the family connection.
So they kind of fibbed, and my grandmother introduced her friend that she had brought along.
Cline crooned Walkin' After Midnight to overwhelming applause from the live audience, while also reaching millions more who were watching at home on TV. At the end, Godfrey asked her if this was her first record or if she had had any hits yet. When she admitted that she hadn't had any hits, he replied, "I've got a hunch this one is." His hunch was right. The song shot up the country charts and made the crossover to the pop charts as well, a first for a female country artist at the time. By all accounts, Cline's appearance on Talent Scouts was the pivotal moment in her career. Patsy Cline's appearance on Talent Scouts put her name out into the world and broadcast her sound into millions of homes. True to Arthur Godfrey's hunch, Walking After Midnight was a hit, but the boost Cline sought from the show never came. Instead, she settled into life with her daughter and husband, who returned from the Army in 1959. Then in 1960, desperate for money, Cline signed to a new label, Decca Records, where she laid down I Fall to Pieces. This new Nashville sound revived Cline's career, though she initially fought the cross-genre style. As her producer at the time, Owen Bradley, said in the book Patsy Cline, The Making of an Icon, what she really had was a pop voice and a country music head. Until Patsy, no country female singer dared being smooth. They were all rough. Cline finally earned a membership in the Grand Ole Opry, a lifelong dream of hers. But then in 1961, she had her second brush with death just months after giving birth to her son. She and her brother were involved in a near-fatal head-on car crash. She had to go through reconstructive surgery on her face and endure tremendous pain, but she managed to return to performing later that year.
Most people would have said, okay, I've had enough.
Patsy Cline's star power could not be denied, and a rising star base could not be contained. As she told her fans during a post-car crash performance, right at the very time I needed you most, you came through with the flyingest colors. A residency at the Mint in Las Vegas soon followed, which was a first for a female country music singer. She also made appearances at the Hollywood Bowl and Carnegie Hall, a performance for which Cline did not get paid. But with the exposure and radio play of Leaving on Your Mind and Crazy, she was on her way to stardom. In a letter to a friend, she wrote, "It's wonderful, but what do I do for 63? It's getting so even Cline can't follow Cline." On March 3, 1963, Cline flew to Kansas City with two other country artists, with her manager piloting the plane to perform at a fundraiser. Poor weather conditions rolled in and grounded flights. Singer Dottie West, worried about her good friend flying, offered Cline a car ride back to Nashville, but she refused, telling a friend, "Don't worry about me, Hoss. When it's my time to go, it's my time to go." Cline's time came March 5, 1963, as the plane crashed just outside of Camden, Tennessee, with pilot inexperience and weather conditions the cause. Nobody survived. Cline was only 30 years old. Patsy Cline's career spanned just 5 years with a scant few hits, yet her staying power nearly 6 decades later is a testament to the significant impact she's had on music history and gender equality. Just consider the words used to describe her by Sally McKillop, who wrote the play You Belong to Me, a Patsy Cline story. She kind of has this mythical quality. She died way too early, and it's like people don't want to let her go. Since her death, Cline's voice and story have remained alive through countless retrospectives, heartfelt accolades, and awards recognition. Her life story became the basis for the 1985 Oscar-nominated biopic Sweet Dreams, which starred Jessica Lange as Cline, and there have also been a number of documentaries and biographies about the iconic singer. She posthumously received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award and was the first female solo artist to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. And her single Crazy is one of the most played jukebox songs of all time. Amid all those accomplishments, it's the person, Patsy Cline, friend, lover, mother, and daughter taken too soon, who's most often remembered. As poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou once said of her, "It's wonderful that whenever her name is mentioned, people's voices fall and they become right sentimental, and rightly so."
On Monday, July 6, 2020, publicist Don Murray Grubbs confirmed that Country Music Hall of Fame inductee Charlie Daniels had passed away at the age of 83, having suffered a severe hemorrhagic stroke.
Charlie Daniels has died. Daniels, of course, most famous for that hit song, "The Devil Went Down to Georgia."
Born October 28, 1936 in Wilmington, North Carolina, Daniels was a staple of the country music community, having enjoyed a career that spanned more than 5 decades. He reportedly spent nearly 12 years in a bar band called Jaguar, with early novelty tracks like Robot Romp. Later moving on to work as a session musician, his early gigs included contributions to albums by Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen. In 1964, It Hurts Me, a song co-written by Daniels and music producer Bob Johnston, was released as an Elvis Presley single. Daniels himself wouldn't receive national attention until 1973 with the release of his third album, Honey in the Rock. The record's breakout hit, a novelty number called Uneasy Rider, cracked the Billboard Hot 100, topping out at number 9. But the accomplishment that brought Daniels directly into the international spotlight came in 1979. That's when the Charlie Daniels Band released The Devil Went Down to Georgia, the now ubiquitous country foot-tapper that peaked at number 3, somehow at the same time that My Sharona was topping the charts. The surprise success of The Devil Went Down to Georgia brought Daniels worldwide fame, charting in the US, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, and even the Netherlands. A decade after its release, The Devil Went Down to Georgia was certified platinum, with over 1 million verified records sold, according to the RIAA. Its colorful narrative and undeniable beat made the song an easy target for covers, parodies, and reimaginings. Bands running the gamut of genres from Primus to Michelle Lambert have performed renditions of the tune, substituting fiddles for harmonicas, electric guitars, and in at least one case, gold turntables. Notably, the song was covered by Steve Wynette for 2007's Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock. As part of the level, the player is tasked with beating a CGI devil in a rock-off, which Charlie Daniels took exception to, due to the fact that it was possible for the devil to win. Initially calling the inclusion of the song, quote, kind of amazing, and describing his excitement at the prospect of, quote, a whole new generation of kids discovering it in an interview with the Fort Myers News Press, Daniels would later loudly express his distaste with its presentation. In a statement on the musician's blog, Daniels said, "I would never grant permission for some company to create a video game version of a song I wrote in which the devil wins a contest. I'm sorely disappointed with the company who owns the copyright for not policing the situation. As it is, they have allowed these people to violate the very essence of the song." Charlie Daniels was never shy about sharing his opinions on matters personal or political. When his song, The South's Gonna Do It Again, became an advertising staple for a Louisiana chapter of the Ku Klux Klan in 1975, Daniels made the bold choice of speaking out publicly against the group, stating, quote, "I'm damn proud of the South, but I sure as hell am not proud of the Ku Klux Klan. I wrote the song about the land I love and my brothers." In 1976, he shared public support for Jimmy Carter's presidential run, and Carter helped to revive the public image of The South's Gonna Do It Again by utilizing it as his campaign song. Daniels performed at Carter's inauguration the following year, and later stated in Mark Kemp's Dixie Lullaby book that Carter was, quote, "the most honorable man to hold the office of President of the United States of America in my lifetime." In his later years, Daniels' political leanings skewed totally to the right. His 1980 single, In America, found new life as a boot-stopping patriotic anthem after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And his support of President George W. Bush was pronounced throughout the 2000s. His blog, Charlie Daniels' Soapbox, found an audience with early writings with titles like An Open Letter to the Hollywood Bunch, in which he criticized liberals in the entertainment industry.
I used to identify myself as a Democrat, but the Democratic Party just kind of walked away from me.
According to the Tennessean, Daniels is survived by his wife Hazel and his son, Charlie Daniels Jr.
Country legend Loretta Lynn has led a remarkably storied life. She's also dealt with a lot of challenges, some of which aren't widely known, even among fans. This is the untold truth of Loretta Lynn. Loretta Lynn was born on April 14, 1932, in Kentucky as Loretta Webb. She had 7 siblings, and her family had to deal with several challenges, particularly financial troubles, during the Great Depression, which understandably made things difficult for them. The Webbs were a coal mining family and had to learn to adjust, making sure that they didn't waste anything at home and efficiently use the limited resources they had.
Everybody started calling me the coal miner's daughter.
To distract herself from the realities of growing up poor, Lynn would often sing music with her family by her side. The singer told WBUR News, "When I was growing up with my sisters and brothers, we all sang and rocked the babies to sleep, but that was as far as we ever did." According to Lynn's autobiography, Coal Miner's Daughter, the singer actively avoided revisiting some parts from her early life after she grew up. Lynn wrote, "I avoid going back to places where there's too much poverty." She added that, while she cherishes her memories, she wouldn't want to revisit the painful bits again. Loretta Lynn decided to get married when she was just shy of 16 years old. According to Rolling Stone, Lynn claimed to be even younger in her autobiography, stating that she was 13 years old, but this statement was ultimately proven to be false. She wrote in Coal Miner's Daughter that her parents were understandably upset when they found out about her decision to get married at such a young age. Her parents ended up crying all night after they first heard the news. Her father warned her future husband to never physically hurt his daughter. Meanwhile, her mom told Loretta that she was making a big mistake. Loretta's mother said to her daughter, "This is something you'll regret for the rest of your life." Nevertheless, Lynn stuck to her guns and exchanged vows with 21-year-old Oliver Lynn, also known as Doolittle Lynn or Do. Loretta Lynn picked up a guitar years after she got married to Oliver. She was encouraged by her husband to polish her music skills. What's more, he gifted her a $17 harmony guitar for her birthday and motivated her to play.
What'd you give me a guitar for?
Because I like the way you sing.
Oliver complimented Loretta's voice, saying that she was talented, something that definitely took her by surprise and spurred her to learn. In Coal Miner's Daughter, Lynn credited her husband for giving her the confidence to pursue a career as a professional musician. She explained, "It wasn't my idea. He told me I could do it. I'd still be a housewife today if he didn't bring that guitar home and then encourage me to be a singer." For her, being noticed was a matter of pride and something she didn't take lightly. It's safe to say Doolittle's gift worked, and Lynn found herself working with local bands and performing at live events. Her first official single, released in 1960, was called "I'm a Honky Tonk Girl." Loretta Lynn revealed in Coal Miner's Daughter that she didn't even know what a honeymoon meant when she got hitched. The first few days were very awkward for Lynn as she tried to figure out what being married meant for her. She realized how difficult marriage could be, later writing, "I can't say I recommend getting married at 13 or 14. She added that marriage is a test of its own and puts immense pressure on a relationship. Plus, Lynn had to learn to embrace her responsibilities really early in life. She'd been married for just a few months when she first started experiencing pregnancy symptoms and became embarrassed when her doctor told her that she was going to have a baby. When Lynn's husband found out about this, he instructed her to go to her parents' house. Reflecting on this, she wrote that her husband was cheating on her with other women back then. This made things a lot more challenging for Lynn, who was already feeling down and out. One of the scariest things about Oliver Lynn was the fact that he was an alcoholic and an abusive husband. Loretta was deeply affected by these things, and some of her songs reflected on her experiences at length. Examples worth noting include Fist City and Don't Come Home a-Drinkin' with Lovin' on Your Mind. However, Loretta chose not to leave her husband despite their rocky relationship. The singer was also acutely aware of her situation, telling CBS, "It was real lonely. I felt sometimes that it was better to be on the bus than to be home," because he was drinking so much. However, Lynn could always stand up for herself. Whenever her husband hit her, she retaliated. She later recalled, "He never hit me one time that I didn't hit him back twice." She further revealed that she only decided to stay put because a broken relationship would have been painful. Lynn told CBS, I didn't need him, but he was my kid's daddy. I had to think of my kids. I can't be that selfish. If you or someone you know is dealing with domestic abuse, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can also find more information, resources, and support at their website. The thing about Loretta Lynn's music is that she's often used it as a medium to explore difficult and controversial topics. Her song titled "The Pill" was incredibly controversial, as it praised oral contraceptives, something that didn't go down too well with some listeners in 1975, and also drew a lot of media attention.
She has never been afraid to speak her mind.
The song was very personal, and Lynn publicly spoke about her views on contraception, telling the Associated Press in 1975, "I tell you, if they'd had the pill a little earlier, I think I'd have eaten them like popcorn." More than a few radio stations decided to ban the song, a preacher from Kentucky took it upon himself to criticize Lynn in a sermon and named the stations that had decided to distance themselves from the pill. There were 60 names on that list. Nonetheless, the song was widely heard. According to Taste of Country, Lynn saw at least 14 songs banned during her career, but she never let that discourage her from making more music. As far as she was concerned, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She told Parade that she never meant to offend anyone. "I would never set out to write something just for it to shock someone. I'm not that clever. It's always been about truth, and if that means radio wants to ban it, well, that's their problem." Loretta Lynn suffered a major loss when one of her closest friends, Patsy Cline, was tragically killed in a plane crash. Lynn never stopped missing her best friend. She even wrote a book on their friendship called Me and Patsy, Kicking Up Dust, and recorded a tribute album. They were both talented musicians who looked like they were destined for great success in the music industry. Remembering Cline, Lynn once said, "We were two bad ones. If she'd still be around, we'd probably both be in the pen." By the time Lynn met Cline, the latter was already an experienced musician who was happy to assist Lynn as she got into the industry. They had a lot to talk about: parenthood, music, and relationships. As Lynn said, "Patsy was always there to tell me what was right and what was wrong. She was my big sister that I never had." The pair had some memorable experiences together, such as the time Cline helped Lynn learn how to drive a car. She was generous with her outfits too, letting Lynn borrow her dresses for public performances.
She's giving me a lot of clothes. That might have been what she's trying to tell me, dress better.
Sadly, on March 5, 1963, Cline and 3 others were killed in a plane crash near Camden, Tennessee. Cline had just performed a benefit concert in Kansas City, Kansas, and was on her way home to Nashville. She was 30 years old. However, Loretta Lynn never stopped talking about her best friend. She revealed that Cline was always in her thoughts, noting, "A lot of times, not even expecting it, but I'll be sitting and thinking, and I'll see Patsy." Loretta Lynn has previously mentioned that she was addicted to sleeping pills when she was struggling to cope during a difficult period during the 1970s. According to People, Lynn's busy, stressful life had led to several health issues, such as blackouts and bleeding ulcers, making everything even more difficult. Lynn was also having trouble getting enough sleep and tried to get some respite by turning to sleeping pills. However, she became addicted and ultimately needed the help of a psychiatrist to get over her addiction. Not much is known about Lynn's addiction, but it's clear that she was able to beat it and make a full recovery. Also, the singer wrote in Coal Miner's Daughter that she was often misunderstood and accused of being hooked on either pain pills or alcohol. She denied these allegations and stated that she was hurt by the claims. Lynn explained that pain pills were a necessity because she had migraine attacks for years and needed something to be able to function. She wrote, "I certainly wasn't taking aspirin to get high. I just wanted my headaches to go away. To tell you the truth, I've always been scared of dope." Loretta Lynn has faced several setbacks in the past as far as her health is concerned. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the singer had to spend time in the hospital in October 2018 after she experienced some health issues. Additionally, in 2017, she'd suffered a massive stroke and had injured her hip earlier in 2018. A family member took to Facebook to announce her October hospitalization, writing, "I'm very sad to report this morning that the Queen of Country Music, Miss Loretta Lynn, has had some setbacks in her recovery and is back in the hospital with some serious issues." The family member asked for prayers from her fans. The family member also said that Lynn is a fighter who doesn't give up or give in. Thankfully, the singer recovered and was back home before long. Lynn's health has also been widely discussed discussed by the media, something that hasn't gone unnoticed. There were rumors flying around in 2019 that she didn't have much time left and was spending her days at an assisted living center. The singer dismissed this, captioning in a 2019 Facebook post, "Well, through the years they've said I'm broke, homeless, cheating, drinking, gone crazy, terminally ill, and even dead. Poor things can't ever get it right."
I feel great. I feel so good that I'm ashamed to even say I feel so good.
While Loretta Lynn is no doubt a source of inspiration for many, she does have some regrets and wishes that she could have done a few things differently in her life. The legend mentioned in a conversation with the Washington Post that she'd missed out on spending enough quality time at home with her family, something that bothered her. Her numerous work commitments meant that she spent a lot of time away from home, which she didn't like. Lynn told the Post, "I think I would have preferred to be a housewife and a mama. I never would have had anything, I know that. But is something everything? I think I would have really enjoyed being home more." What made things more complex was her relationship with her late husband, Doolittle, who passed away at the age of 69 in 1996. According to CBS News, Lynn was acutely aware of the fact that her life was rough, and if she could have been given a second chance, she would not repeat her past mistakes and wouldn't want to relive her experiences. Loneliness was a big part of her life. Her daughter, Sissy, noted that her success didn't take away from one undeniable reality. Lynn was very lonely, Sissy said. She lived a lonely life, and so did Dad. She has had this unbelievable success, but that doesn't make up for lonely. That doesn't make up for coming home one day and your children are all grown up and married.
Famed country singer Johnny Cash may have had 5 children, but not all of them benefited equally from his will. Johnny Cash was born in Arkansas in 1932. He was raised on a cotton farm where he spent his childhood years working the land with his family. Cash had an affinity for music even as a child, and he penned his first song at age 12. When he got older, he spent a few years in the Air Force, where he and his friends created their first band. Then he met his first wife, Vivian, and they married in 1954. Their first daughter, Roseanne, was born in 1955, followed by Kathleen, Cindy, and Tara in the years that followed. According to biography, Vivian reportedly became concerned about her husband's heavy drinking and drug usage, as well as the fact that he was away on tour so often, and she filed for divorce in 1966. At his lowest point, his old touring companion June Carter helped Johnny seek treatment for drug addiction. The pair would later marry in 1968, and they welcomed their son John Carter Cash in March 1970. Between them, the pair had a large family. While Johnny had 4 daughters with his ex-wife Vivian, June also had 2 kids, Rosie and Carlene, from her previous marriage.
And he showed absolutely no less love and consideration to my sisters Rosie and Carlene.
Johnny Cash continued to release new music throughout the 1970s, and by 1980, he had earned his spot in the Country Music Hall of Fame. But he also began to have health issues, undergoing double bypass heart surgery in 1988, and being diagnosed with autonomic neuropathy in 1997, per Boston.com. Understandably, Cash was completely heartbroken when June died in May 2003, and he passed away in September of the same year due to complications from diabetes. After such a long and prolific career, Cash left behind plenty of money. After decades of creating hit country tunes, he had reportedly amassed somewhere between $60 million and $100 million. And over time, the money continued to grow, reaching as much as $300 million. According to the Nashville Ledger, Cash finalized his estate details just before his death. And as his will would stipulate, Cash's son would inherit more money than his daughters. The family spat focuses on one song in particular, and that's Ring of Fire. June Carter Cash, Johnny Cash, and Merle Kilgore wrote the song together, and it was released in 1963, 5 years before June and Johnny got married. Decades after the couple first wrote Ring of Fire, the song caused a heated debate among the Cash children. Since June and Johnny only had one biological child together, John Carter Cash, that meant that all their other children were snubbed from obtaining royalties from the hit tune. Johnny's 4 daughters from his first marriage didn't get any royalties from Ring of Fire, but they did receive $1 million each when their father died, per Contact Music. While it's no small sum, they missed out on the steady stream of royalties generated by the beloved hit country song. According to the Daily Express, Cash's 4 daughters eventually sued their half-brother over royalties from the song. However, they lost their case in 2007. As a result, John Carter Cash remains the publishing rights owner for at least some of his dad's extensive musical legacy for the foreseeable future. And per Country Music Today, we probably won't get any more details about Johnny Cash's estate anytime soon, since the rest of his will is confidential. Subsequently, most of the details will be permanently sealed off from the public. There are conflicting stories about the origins of Ring of Fire. According to the Irish Examiner, Johnny Cash told his first wife Vivian that he gave June half credit on the tune, but only because he felt bad that the singer was low on funds. Conversely, the New York Daily News reported that Cash and Kilgore wrote the song while on a fishing trip. However, since Cash was going through a divorce at the time, he reportedly added June as a writer so that the song wasn't entirely tied to him. Regardless of the actual origins of the song, Johnny Cash, Merle Kilgore, and June Carter Cash are officially credited as writers of the song. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357.